Hi, this is Ken McCarthy, and we're celebrating the 20th anniversary of the System Seminar. First System Seminar was in 2002, and I've been reading from the System Club Letters book, taking a little break from that right now, and what I'm doing now is talking about books that have had a huge impact on my life that I strongly recommend. I've already done two. I did one yesterday and the day before yesterday. I urge you, if you did not hear those two calls, to make sure you listen and get those books. I cannot imagine how I would have functioned in this world of business and marketing and advertising and the internet without having read and studied those two. And they're pretty inexpensive. One of them's not so easy to find anymore, but very few people understand the value of it, so it has not been jacked up in price yet. But it will be maybe after yesterday's call. But today we're going to talk about the third book, and I'm giving these to you in the order of urgency. So the first book I recommend that I would say is in some ways the most important. The second book, the second most important. Not that it's of secondary importance; it's also a primary book, but if you can't read two books simultaneously, you have to read one, and even if you jump back and forth between them, you can only read one book at a time. So that's why I'm putting them in order of priority, not because any of them are secondary or tertiary or should be relegated to never. All these books should actually be studied. Not because I'm like some schoolmaster that wants you to read books for the sake of reading books. I'd like you to make money and be successful. And this, getting good advice from people that really know what they're talking about is one of the best ways to get there faster. And books just happen to be the magic road for getting access to minds that you otherwise would not have access to. So the third book, this was a favorite of Gary Halbert, and I've mentioned his name before. If you are just getting started in this, or you're an internet marketer that doesn't have a background in the foundations of marketing, find out who Gary Halbert is and make sure you get access to some of his stuff. But anyway, one of his favorite books was the Robert Collier letter book. And Robert Collier was an author and a publisher and a guy who sold books by mail. And he also sold lots and lots and lots of other stuff for other people. And one thing I want to say here, which is so obvious that it's easy to miss, and I certainly missed it too. The name of this book is the Robert Collier Letter Book. Now, in the world, in this age of internet marketing, do we even think about letters at all? Do we send and receive letters? The only letters we get are from, the IRS or some scammy politician. But in the olden days, the writing of letters used to be the most common way people communicated. Remember, there was a time with no telephone, so if you wanted to communicate with your buddy or your loved ones in another county or state or country, letter writing was it. So somebody at some point came up with the brilliant idea, I don't know who it was, it must have been one guy figured it out, that hey, we can use letters to sell stuff. And they had this really important insight that the closer our sales letter is to a real communication of person to person, the more effective and powerful the sales letter will be. Why? Because people read letters with sort of an open mind. They do not necessarily read ads with an open mind. So this is a really kind of important distinction. So it's the Robert Collier letter book, sales letter book. So he's talking about what's now called long form ad copy. Now, to bring this to the modern era, the so-called modern era, video sales letters. What are those? Video sales letters, right? It's a sales letter that's being put out by video. So if you want to make huge progress in your advertising and in everything you do, learn how to write a good sales letter, and there's hardly anybody better than Robert Collier. One of the things we're very lucky about in this world of direct response advertising, of which internet marketing is a subset, is that a lot of the great ad writers also wrote great books. I mean, it's amazing. You know, we talked about two of them in the two previous calls, which I urge you, by the way, to make sure you listen to. Do not fail to listen to those so that you get the titles of those books. And Collier's is just a great example of that. So I'm going to read just the table of contents, and then I'm going to share one of the great ideas I got from Collier. And you know what's so interesting is, you know, there's a book, and this one is big. It's over 400 pages. Do you have to read the whole thing? No. You know, if the choice is between reading, you know, skimming a book and grabbing a few ideas here and there and not doing anything, hey, go with the skimming and grabbing a few ideas here and there. If you have the time to read the whole thing, some books merit it. And the only books that I'm going to talk about are the books that merit being read from cover to cover. But this is something that a lot of people don't understand. This is really important about books, and school does not teach you this. Books exist to serve you. You don't exist to serve the book. So you read any way you want. You want to read the book backwards? Fine. You want to read every other chapter? Fine. You want to skim and just read the summaries? Fine. Whatever works. The most important thing is to get the books in your hands and start extracting the gold from them. So here's some of the titles, some of the chapters. What makes some letters pay? How to arouse that acquisitive feeling. All right? And that's a really interesting thing that he's saying there. It's not just a matter of showing how great our product is. We also have to get people in the mood and the mindset to be acquisitive. Because if someone may think what you're doing is the greatest thing in the world, but if they're not in the acquisitive mood, nothing's going to happen. So that's a really interesting chapter. Getting news interest into your letters. And I'll tell you this, the thing that people always respond to, always, every person in every circumstance, is what's new. We are news gathering creatures, and you want to get news interest into your sales letters. Word pictures that make people want your products. And we're going to talk about that in a second. Motives that make people buy. Isn't that important? Isn't it important to think through? Remember, it's not just enough that your product is great. You know, that should be a given. The real issue is, what the heck does the prospect care about and want? And then presenting your product in such a way that it fits that. The motive of the buyer. The motive of the buyer is everything. Give me somebody with a strong motive to buy, and I don't even need to be a copywriter. Give me someone with no motive to buy, and there is nothing I can say or do that's going to move the needle. So we need to know what the motives are, and we need to address those people's motives. Another chapter, the proof is in the pudding. And this is, well, I think it's pretty obvious, but maybe not. People want to, you made a claim, people want to see the proof. Gathering proofs and presenting them in a creative way is one of the best ways to persuade people that what you've got is worth getting. How to put a hook into your letters. Selling $2 million worth of O. Henry stories. Now, O. Henry was a short story writer, and you have to understand this book was written in the 30s. $2 million in 1930s, and you could have owned the world. I mean, now it's just like kind of the bare minimum to feel semi-prosperous. Back in the 30s, I mean, you would have had a real mansion with butlers and maids. You would have had a real yacht. You would have had a 200-acre estate. You would have been the richest guy in your county, if not your state. $2 million was a lot of money in those days. So to sell $2 million worth of short stories, I mean, that is an epic accomplishment. Other chapters, $1 million worth of orders in the first 6 months, taking the guess out of advertising, how to reach the leaders. That's a good one. Will you, and I love this, will you accept this little gift? It's always an interesting way to begin a sales relationship by offering somebody a relevant gift. And nothing too grand, because that's a little suspicion provoking, but just something thoughtful. A lot of money to be made in developing that skill, and Robert Collier gets into that in the book. I've only read a few of the chapter titles and just a few of the subjects that he gets into. It goes on and on and on. But here's the great idea that I got from the Robert Collier letter book, and it was very liberating, and I hope you find it liberating too. Here it is. It's not the specific words that sell. It's the ideas behind the words. So if you're stuck trying to get the perfect language, stop that. Don't worry. What you want to do is spend time percolating and thinking about what is the best way, what's the best angle, what's the best place to start, what's the best place to make the ultimate, I can't think of the word here. See, I'm going to have to think of a word, but that's not what matters. What matters is coming up with the idea behind the words, getting that rock solid, and then writing whatever you write. There's probably 100 ways to write a successful ad for any given product if the fundamental idea is right. And very few people talk about this, and people are more likely to focus on the words, 25 powerful words and phrases, and all that stuff's good. You need to know it if you want to be an ad writer. But what you really need to become good at is the idea behind the words. And the Robert Collier letter book is sort of the Bible of how to get your mind into that mindset.